In a major development in the ongoing Ukraine war, a deal has now been reached with Russia that will allow Ukraine to resume its exports of grain through the Black Sea. This major breakthrough was announced by the Turkey President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's office on Thursday. The deal is to be signed in Istanbul by Ukraine, Russia, Turkey and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. According to an official statement from Turkey, Kiev, Moscow and Ankara will gather later today to sign the UN proposed deal to restart grain exports from Ukraine's besieged Black Sea ports. The development comes after months of failed attempts by the West to release the grain stuck in Ukraine. According to reports under the UN brokered deal, Ukrainian vessels will guide grain ships in and out through mined port waters. Secondly, Russia will need to adhere to a temporary ceasefire while shipments move. Thirdly, Turkey, along with the UN, will inspect ships to prevent weapon smuggling from the war zone. The deal is also meant to facilitate Russian exports of grain and fertilizer via the Black Sea. Ukraine's foreign ministry, meanwhile, has confirmed that another UN-led round of talks regarding grain exports would be taking place in Turkey today, and a formal document may be signed following that. The UN and Turkey have been working for nearly 2 months to broker a grain deal. This as fears of a global food crisis continue to loom the world over, as Russia and Ukraine are both major global wheat suppliers, and the ongoing war has precisely halted the supply of grains from the region. According to estimates, some 20 million tons of grain is stuck in Odessa, which needs immediate export facilities. The invasion has sent food prices soaring and has left millions at risk of hunger. Russia denies blockading Ukraine's ports. It blames Ukraine for laying mines at sea and Western sanctions for slowing Russia's own exports. The U.S., meanwhile, has welcomed the deal to unblock Ukraine grain exports. During a press briefing, the State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the focus should now be on holding Russia accountable for implementing this agreement.
We welcome the announcement of this agreement in principle, but what we're focusing on now is holding Russia accountable for implementing this agreement and for enabling Ukrainian grain to get to world markets. It has been far too long that Russia has enacted this blockade.
Ukraine and Russia are set to sign that deal. Let's get in further details from our correspondent Rosie Burchard, who's joining us on the broadcast from Brussels. Rosie, get us up to speed with what we expect to happen over the next few hours.
Well, as you rightly pointed out, an agreement is expected to be signed in Istanbul, in Turkey, around 1300 GMT. That's an agreement, as you mentioned, that should pave the way for Ukrainian grains to be exported and for Ukrainian food exports to start flowing once again. And I wanted to highlight here, the stakes could not be higher. Antonio Guterres, who's the UN Secretary General, has in the past warned that the fallout of this conflict in Ukraine is threatening tens of millions of people worldwide with hunger. And Ukraine is a major food exporter. It exports about 50% of the world's sunflower oil, 15% of its corn, 12% of its wheat. So really, as I said, really high stakes here. Now, when it comes to Western officials and officials here in Brussels and the European Union, they have been calling for a deblocking of these ports. But of course, Russia and Brussels have very different points of view here. Brussels says that Russia is entirely to blame for this unfolding global food crisis. Moscow, meanwhile, says that it's to do with Western sanctions, and the EU has really hit back on that point, saying that it has no sanctions on food supplies, it has no sanctions on fertilizers, for example. So really differing views there, and certainly some strong condemnation from officials here in Brussels. We've heard, for example, the European Union's Foreign Affairs Chief Josep Borrell in the past accused Russia of committing what he called a real war crime when it comes to blocking exports of food. Now, the Russian Foreign Ministry has also been accused of trying to kind of spread propaganda, particularly in African nations, when it comes to, again, who's to blame for this unfolding food crisis. If this breakthrough is indeed going ahead, which is very much the expectation at this time, this will be the first major deal between these two sides since the invasion of Ukraine back in February. So something which should, with very high stakes, unlock a path ahead for food exports to start flowing again, which of course will be a huge sigh of relief with, as Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned, tens of millions at risk of food insecurity and hunger otherwise.
Right, Rosie, let's also talk about what Ned Price said and the overall reaction that's coming from the United States, that the way forward now and the key focus should be on making sure that Russia implements this agreement. But how exactly would that happen?
It's a great question, and it's something that officials may be scratching their heads about here in Brussels as well. I should say here in the European Union, where there's 27 member states, there are differing views on how to approach Russia. For example, French President Emmanuel Macron had, since the start of the war, had several phone calls with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's been engaged in trying to encourage peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, whereas some other European Union countries, including the Baltic states and Poland, say that nobody should be talking to Russian President Vladimir Putin at all, that in fact you should not be engaging with him, and that if Russia is to be isolated by the West, then those meetings or those phone calls should stop. And I think those countries which are more sceptical will also be very sceptical of signing any sort of deal with Moscow. They will be wondering exactly to what degree they can trust that this will be implemented, and that's something which will be down to the details of this deal, which we don't yet have. So that should be unveiled in the next couple of hours. I suppose Turkey is likely to play a key role in there as some sort of guarantor. As you mentioned, Turkey is expected to be inspecting ships due to Russian concerns about weapons smuggling. Let's not forget, Moscow accuses NATO nations of fighting a proxy war against Russia by arming Ukraine. That's something they deny. They say they are helping Ukraine to defend itself against what they call an illegal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine on Russia's part. So still some major uncertainty ahead, but hopes at least that this deal will unlock food exports at a time when that's of absolutely crucial concern.
Rosie, we are leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast and getting us those updates. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.